chainsaws, castles, herons, kaiju. 4 wildly different stories. 4 Japanese films, all box office hits in North America. Chainsaw Man, the movie, Reze arc, just stunned analysts with a $17 million opening weekend. Demon Slayer, Infinity Castle outperformed The Conjuring Last Rites and The Long Walk in its debut. The Boy and the Heron became the first original anime to top the US box office. And Godzilla Minus One? It's now the highest grossing Japanese live action film in American history, with showtimes extended indefinitely when it originally was going to be just a limited release. This isn't a fluke. This isn't a trend. This is a shift. And yet, the loudest voices online have already decided what it means. These movies aren't woke, they say. That's why they're doing well. That's not just wrong, it's lazy. It's a willful misunderstanding of what these films are, who they're for, and why they're resonating. Because Godzilla Minus One is political. Squid Game was political. Chainsaw Man is emotionally raw and morally complex. These aren't sanitized four-quadrant crowd pleasers. They're culturally specific, emotionally grounded, and unapologetically Japanese. And that's why they're winning. Let's start with the most persistent and, frankly, most misleading narrative surrounding anime's box office success in North America. The idea that these films are thriving because they're not political. You've heard it, you've seen it, it's the go-to explanation from a certain corner of online punditry. Chainsaw Man isn't woke, Demon Slayer doesn't preach, Godzilla Minus One is just a monster movie. That line of thinking is not just wrong, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what politics actually are. Take Godzilla Minus One. This isn't a popcorn flick about a giant lizard wrecking Tokyo. It's a post-war character study about survivor's guilt, national shame, and the moral weight of rebuilding a country that once demanded its citizens die for it. The protagonist, Koichi Shikishima, is a kamikaze pilot who fakes a malfunction to avoid a suicide mission. He survives, but he's haunted by that choice. He's punished for it. And he's forced to live in a society that treats his survival as a moral failure. That's not apolitical. That's a direct confrontation with Japan's militaristic past and its post-war identity crisis. It's a film about trauma, accountability, and the value of human life in a nation that once treated it cheaply. But because it doesn't map neatly onto American culture or binaries, because it's not about race, gender, or party affiliation, some viewers assumed it's neutral. It's not. It's just not about them. This same misreading happened with Squid Game. And let's be clear, Squid Game is Korean, not Japanese. When it exploded on Netflix, people said, finally, a show that's not woke. Meanwhile, it was a brutal indictment of capitalism, class warfare, and the commodification of human suffering. It was political to its core, but again, it wasn't American politics, it was Korean. It was a critique of South Korea's hyper-competitive society, its debt culture, and the emotional toll of economic precarity. And this isn't a new phenomenon. Let's rewind to the year 2000 and talk about Battle Royale. Battle Royale was so controversial in Japan that it was nearly banned. The film depicts a dystopian future where a class of high school students is forced by the government to fight to the death on a remote island. It's brutal, satirical, and deeply political. But its politics are Japanese. It's a critique of Japan's rigid education system, its generational disconnect, and the societal pressure placed on youth to conform, obey, and succeed at all costs. If you're an American viewer watching Battle Royale on DVD or late night cable, you might have seen it as just another edgy action flick. You might have missed the cultural critique entirely because it wasn't aimed at you. It wasn't about your country. It was about Japan. And yet, when The Hunger Games came out over a decade later, many people immediately drew comparisons. The premise, a government forcing children to kill each other in a televised death match, was strikingly similar. Critics and fans alike accused The Hunger Games of being a sanitized, westernized imitation of Battle Royale. Suzanne Collins, the author of The Hunger Games, has insisted she'd never seen the film. And maybe that's the truth, but the similarities are undeniable. Now let's talk about Oldboy. The 2003 Korean original is one of the most haunting, disturbing, and culturally loaded films of the 21st century. It's not just shocking, it's deeply critical of Korean customs, repression, and the emotional violence embedded in social hierarchies. The infamous twist that Oh Dae-soo unknowingly had sex with his own daughter isn't just there for shock value. It's a metaphor for generational trauma, for the way secrets and shame metastasize in a culture that prizes silence and obedience. But when Spike Lee directed the 2013 American remake, that same twist was transplanted into a completely different cultural context, and it didn't work. It felt gratuitous, it felt exploitative, it felt like a copy of a copy, stripped of meaning. Because the remake tried to rip the story from South Korea and drop it into America without accounting for the cultural differences that made the original resonate. In Korea, Oldboy was a critique. In America, it was a spectacle. And that's the point. When East Asian creators tell stories that are deeply rooted in their own cultural anxieties, they're often misunderstood, or in some cases flattened, by Western audiences. The politics are there. They're just not always legible to outsiders. So when pundits say these films are succeeding because they're clean, what they really mean is, I didn't recognize the politics, so I assumed there weren't any. That's not analysis, that's projection. And it's time we move past it. Let's shift focus. If Chapter 1 was about what these films aren't, namely apolitical, then Chapter 2 is about what they are, unapologetically Japanese. Not in the touristy, surface-level sense of cherry blossoms and samurai swords, but in the deeper structural sense. These stories are built on Japanese values, Japanese pacing, Japanese emotional logic. And that's exactly why they resonate. Because here's the paradox. The more culturally specific a story is, the more universal it becomes. Not because everyone understands every detail, but because authenticity travels. When a creator tells a story that matters deeply to them, it finds people who need it, even if they're halfway across the world. That's what we're seeing with anime's rise in North America. These films and series weren't made with Western audiences in mind. They weren't test screened in Burbank. They weren't filtered through global marketing departments. They were made for Japan, and that's why they work. Now, let's talk about what this looks like in practice. Take Chainsaw Man. It's not just a story about a boy with chainsaws for arms. It's a meditation on poverty, loneliness, and emotional numbness. Denji doesn't want to save the world. He wants jam on his toast. He wants someone to hug him. He wants to feel something. And the world he lives in punishes him for wanting those things. That's not a Marvel arc. That's not a hero's journey. That's a trauma narrative wrapped in gore and absurdity. And yet, it works. Because it's honest. Because it's Japanese. Because it's not trying to be universal. It's trying to be real. Or look at Demon Slayer. The series is soaked in cultural texture. The clothing, the architecture, the rituals, the way characters speak and bow and mourn, it's all deeply rooted in Taisho-era Japan. The story doesn't pause to explain these things. It doesn't translate them for Western viewers. It trusts the audience to either understand or accept, and that truth is powerful. It's the same reason The Boy and the Heron resonates so deeply. Miyazaki didn't make that film to be understood. He made it to be felt. It's a dreamlike journey through grief, memory, and the collapse of childhood certainty. It's not linear. It's not tidy. It's not designed for global clarity. It's designed for emotional truth. And audiences responded, not because they understood every symbol or reference, but because they felt the weight of it, because the specificity made it real. This is what Hollywood has lost. The courage to be specific. The courage to be local. The courage to tell a story that might not land with everyone, but will land deeply with someone. Think about Cowboy Bebop. It's a space western, sure, but it's also a jazz album. A meditation on regret. A slow burn through existential drift. It's not a franchise, it's a mood. And it became a cult hit not because it was designed to be one, but because it was designed to be itself. Or take Kamen Rider and Super Sentai. These shows have been running in Japan for decades, since the 70s. They're loud, colorful, melodramatic, and deeply ritualistic. Most Americans only know Super Sentai through Power Rangers, which chopped up the footage, rewrote the plots, and added American actors. For years, fans couldn't even access the original Japanese versions. They were locked out of the source material. But now they can. Streaming changed everything. Platforms like Netflix, Crunchyroll, and even Disney Plus have made anime globally accessible. According to Variety, the anime streaming market has exploded, with Netflix investing heavily in original productions and Crunchyroll expanding its reach across continents. And audiences are responding, not because these shows are tailored to them, but because they're not. They're responding because these stories feel alive, they feel personal, they feel like someone actually cared, and that's what Hollywood forgot. Let's talk about the four-quadrant film. If you've never heard the term, it refers to movies designed to appeal to all four major audience demographics: male and female, over and under 25. It's the holy grail of Hollywood marketing, and it's become a creative straitjacket. Studios are pumping hundreds of millions into tentpoles that must appeal to everyone. That means no sharp edges, no cultural specificity, no moral ambiguity, just quips, spectacle, and IP recognition. It's why so many blockbusters today feel hollow. They're not stories, they're products. They're designed to offend no one, challenge no one, and please everyone just enough to justify the budget. But here's the irony. The more you try to appeal to everyone, the less you appeal to everyone. It goes back to the if you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. Okay? There's an old meme that nails it. Japanese movies are made for Japan. German films are made for Germany. British films are made for England. American films are made for everyone because in America, profit comes before all else. And when you make something for everyone, you often end up making something for no one. This obsession with mass appeal has drained Hollywood of authenticity. Every rough edge is sanded down. Every risk is mitigated. Every story is engineered for maximum profit, not maximum impact. And the result is a kind of creative beige, technically competent, visually polished, and emotionally inert. You can see it in the way studios approach storytelling now. Characters are written to be quote-unquote relatable, which often means they're stripped of any cultural specificity or moral complexity. Dialogue is flattened into quips, themes are diluted into vague affirmations, and endings are test screened into oblivion. Meanwhile, anime doesn't care if you relate. It doesn't care if you get every reference. It doesn't care if you're comfortable. It cares about telling the story it wants to tell. That's why Chainsaw Man can be grotesque, tragic, and hilarious in the same breath. That's why Demon Slayer can spend 10 minutes on a single emotional beat without cutting to a joke. That's why Godzilla Minus One can end not with triumph, but with a quiet, uncertain breath. Because these stories aren't trying to please everyone. They're trying to mean something. And that's what Hollywood forgot. It's not just about the movies themselves, it's about the economics behind them. Okay, when a studio spends $250 million on a film, they can't afford to alienate anyone, so they play it safe. They test every line, they reshoot every scene, they strip out anything that might be too specific. But specificity is what makes stories matter. It's the difference between a film that feels like it was made by a person and a film that feels like it was made by a spreadsheet. And audiences can tell. They can tell when a story is trying to connect versus when it's trying to convert. They can tell when a character is written with care versus when they're written to check boxes. They can tell when a film is trying to say something versus when it's trying to sell something. And increasingly, they're choosing the former. They're choosing anime. They're choosing specificity. They're choosing stories that weren't made for everyone, but were made for someone. And that's why the four-quadrant model is cracking. Because it's built on the assumption that audiences want comfort, but what they really want is connection. And anime, for the most part, delivers that. Let's talk numbers. Because for all the noise about wokeness or politics, the box office doesn't lie. The Wind Rises, Miyazaki's last film before The Boy and the Heron, made just $5.2 million domestically. Shin Godzilla in 2016? Only $1.9 million. These were critically acclaimed films, but they didn't break through in the US theatrical market. They were niche, they were limited release, they were quote-unquote for fans. Now, The Boy and the Heron opened at $12.8 million and topped the US box office. Chainsaw Man, the movie Reze, is projected to earn up to $17 million in its debut. Demon Slayer Infinity Council outperformed major horror and drama releases including The Conjuring Last Rites and The Long Walk. Godzilla Minus One had grossed over $50 million in North America and had its showtimes extended indefinitely. And Godzilla Minus One didn't just dominate the box office, it won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. That's historic. It beat out Hollywood blockbusters with budgets 5 to 10 times larger, and it did so with the lowest budget of any nominee in the category. That's not just win for Toho Studios. That's a seismic shift in what American audiences and the industry itself are willing to recognize. But to understand how far anime and Japanese genre films have come, we do need to look back. Let's rewind to 2004. Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie was released at the height of the franchise's popularity. The card game was everywhere, the anime was a ratings juggernaut, kids were dueling in cafeterias and trading holographic cards like currency, and yet the movie, despite a $20 million production budget, grossed just under $30 million worldwide. That's barely a profit. And it was a theatrical release backed by 4Kids and Warner Brothers. It should have been a slam dunk. Instead, it was a cautionary tale. Even Cowboy Bebop the movie, released theatrically in 2003, at least here in the United States, after the series had become a cult hit in North America, grossed only $1.2 million globally, with just $1 million being made in North America. That's not a reflection of quality, it's a reflection of timing. The infrastructure wasn't there. The audience wasn't ready. The market didn't know how to support anime theatrically. Compare that to now. Chainsaw Man and Demon Slayer are pulling in numbers that rival mainstream Hollywood releases. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. And they're doing it without compromise. Streaming played a massive role in this shift. According to Variety and Screen Rant, the anime streaming market has exploded thanks to platforms like Netflix, Crunchyroll, and even Disney+. These platforms have made anime accessible, immediate, and bingeable. They've removed the barriers, no more waiting for dubs, no more bootleg DVDs, no more gatekeeping. And in doing so, they've created a new generation of fans. Fans who grew up watching Naruto, Bleach, Attack on Titan, and My Hero Academia. Fans who don't see anime as foreign, they see it as foundational. It's not a subculture anymore, it is culture. This shift didn't happen overnight. It's the result of years of slow, steady exposure, okay? Toonami, Adult Swim, DVD box sets, fan subs, conventions, cosplay, Crunchyroll forums, TikTok edits, reaction videos. All of it built the scaffolding for what we're seeing now. Anime as a dominant force in global entertainment. And those fans are showing up. They're buying tickets. They're filling theaters. They're making Chainsaw Man a hit. They're making Demon Slayer a franchise. They're making Godzilla Minus One a cultural event. And they're doing it not because these stories are safe, but because they're real. Because when a story is made with care, with vision, with cultural specificity and emotional truth, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It matters that it matters. And anime matters. Let's also talk about the economics of risk. Hollywood has conditioned itself to believe that only massive four-quadrant tentpoles can justify theatrical release. Mid-budget dramas, dead. Quirky indies, sent straight to streaming. Anything that doesn't fit the blockbuster mold is treated like a liability. But anime is proving that you don't need a $200 million budget to make an impact. Chainsaw Man didn't need a global marketing blitz. Demon Slayer didn't need a crossover with the MCU. Godzilla Minus One didn't need a post-credit scene teasing a cinematic universe. They just needed to be good, and they needed to be themselves. That's the lesson here. Not just for studios, but for creators. You don't have to dilute your story to make it universal. You don't have to flatten your culture to make it palatable. You don't have to chase algorithms to find an audience. You just have to care. You just have to mean it. And audiences will find you. Because the numbers don't lie. And the numbers are telling a story. A story about specificity, a story about authenticity, a story about the power of being unapologetically yourself. And that story is winning. So where does this leave us? It leaves us in a world where the most exciting, emotionally resonant, and politically potent films aren't coming from Hollywood. They're coming from Tokyo, from Kyoto, from studios that don't care about four quadrants, that don't care about global appeal, that don't care about pleasing everyone. And that's why they're winning. Because when you stop trying to be everything to everyone, you can finally be something to someone. Chainsaw Man wasn't made for you. Godzilla Minus One wasn't made for you. The Boy and the Heron wasn't made for you. And that's exactly why they matter. They weren't designed to be safe. They weren't designed to be universal. They were designed to be honest. And in a media landscape dominated by algorithmic sameness, that honesty is revolutionary. These films are political, but not in the way pundits expect. They're political because they confront trauma, grief, shame, and survival through the lens of their own culture. They don't flatten those ideas to fit Western narratives. They don't dilute their meaning to chase global relatability. They trust their audience to feel the truth, even if they don't fully understand it. And audiences are responding, not just in Japan, not just in Korea, but in North America, in Europe, in Latin America, everywhere. Because authenticity travels. We've seen this before. Battle Royale was misunderstood. Old Boy was misadapted. Cowboy Bebop the movie was undersupported. Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie was overmarketed and underdelivered. These were stories that arrived before the infrastructure was ready, before the audience was primed, before the culture had shifted. But now the culture has shifted. Now Godzilla Minus One wins Oscars. Now Chainsaw Man tops box office charts. Now Demon Slayer fills IMAX screens. Now The Boy and the Heron opens at #1. And it's not because these stories are apolitical. It's because they're unapologetically themselves. So what does the future look like? It looks like Specificity. It looks like Risk. It looks like stories that don't explain themselves, don't compromise themselves, and don't apologize for themselves. It looks like anime. And if Hollywood wants to survive, not just financially, but artistically, it needs to stop chasing everyone and start listening to someone. It needs to stop flattening stories and start deepening them. It needs to stop asking, will this play in Portland? Will this play in Kazakhstan? Will this play in Rio de Janeiro? And start asking, does this matter to anyone? Because the future isn't about being universal. It's about being undeniable. And anime is undeniable.